So here, that's the bell that lets you know this is kind of like an extra bonus bit on the back end of your podcast. Mark's still here.
Yes, hello.
Robbie Collin is here making a guest appearance.
Hello.
Robbie. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Spectacular shorts, can I say?
Thank you very much. They're not even visible on the camera because it's sub-desk.
But a very brave choice.
Really?
Why brave?
Just to wear shorts around Westminster. They don't do that kind of thing here.
Really?
No. This is full of MPs. They don't wear shorts.
Well, last time I came anywhere near you wearing shorts, you said I was dressed as a child, so then I went and put my suit on. So
yeah, well, that is true. Anyway, so we're going to talk about Hereditary, and it is going to be full of spoilers,
okay.
So everyone knows precisely where we are.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Hereditary, don't carry on.
Yes, and I mean this is up to and including the last shot in the film.
Oh yes, it really is. Yeah, yes, this is fully spoilerific.
So this is Ari Aster's debut feature. This is Hereditary. It stars. This is for everybody else who hasn't seen it, which will be the majority of people, and they'll try to get some kind of head or tail out of this. Toni Collette, Millie Shapiro, Gabriel Byrne, Alex Wolff as the Grahams, a family haunted after the death of their secretive grandmother. It's released on June 15. Very positive critical response, currently at 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. But it is fair to say it polarised mainstream audiences and certainly the members of the church. So to duke it out under Queensberry rules, we have super sub Iron Robbie Collin. Hello, Iron Robbie.
Hello, hello.
Who loved the film, and the Brockenhurst Bruiser, who was somewhat less enthused. So I've got here some of the things that you have said.
Okay.
I'm very, very familiar with what Mark thinks. So I think, Robbie, you should go first and tell me, in essence, why you think it's as good as you do.
Okay, so this is, I think, Mark's disconnect with this film, and I'm kind of loath to bring up this quote again because you sort of covered it extensively, but it's this idea that it's being sold as the new Exorcist, and I for me as a critic, that's kind of, I'm sure I've done it many times, but it's a slightly lazy go-to technique to say, okay, so this new film that I really enjoy, it's the new classic film from 30, 40 years ago. But I looked up the review in which that was said, and I think by excerpting that phrase and sticking it on the poster, they're not kind of doing justice to the observation that was being made in the review, which is that in thematic terms, it's a lot like The Exorcist because you've got a family unit that's basically being terrorised by, or torn apart rather, by these kind of exterior demonic forces. And I think also the critic was trying to say that it's a film that has the same sort of cultural status for people going to cinema now as The Exorcist did in its day, which is this kind of big, era-defining, get people talking horror film. Yeah. I don't think the mechanics of the film are at all like The Exorcist, and this is where I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, they're not.
The Exorcist is a film that kind of terrorises you consistently from the very start. And what Ari Aster has said about Hereditary is that he wanted to make a conspiracy movie without any exposition. So instead of terror, you've got this slow build of paranoia and dread. And to me, that kind of chimes more with a film like Rosemary's Baby, where the audience is kind of clued in from the very, very start that what's going on is horrifically sinister and almost certainly supernatural demonic things going on in the background. But it's watching the characters catch up to that point. And there's that moment around 3/4 of the way through, the very highly controversial moment where Toni Collette's character opens the box of her mother's belongings and out falls the book about summoning demons and the kind of telltale mats that she's been sewing for people that should prove her links with a demonic cult. And that's the point at which the film kind of, the characters snap up to the same point of knowledge as the audience do. Now, for me, this film is so scary because you know exactly what's going to happen. You don't know the details of how it's going to happen, but everything is so meticulously foreshadowed. You know, you've got the decapitation of the daughter by the curse is foreshadowed by the decapitation of the bird by the daughter, and there's this idea that all of these big, horrible things that happen to the family are all being kind of, there's these little weird dress rehearsals for them in their life before. Even if when you're watching the film, you're not kind of going, oh, well, I bet this happens to them later. It's planting these seeds subconsciously. Now, this is something that I didn't fully pick up on the first time I saw the film. It was only a second visit when I knew the kind of the scary things that were going to happen. I was braced for them. I was prepared for them to come, and it wasn't quite as as viscerally chilling as it was first time round. But in seeing the smartness of the technique and how every little awful thing that happens in this film, up until the tableau at the end, this final shot up in the treehouse, where you have King Payman's basically been summoned. He's
Sorry, who's been summoned?
King Payman, one of the kings of hell, has been sort of lured up from the depths of the netherworld by this cult and has been instilled, first of all, in the granddaughter, of Tony Collette's mother, so Tony Collette's daughter, is, first of all, she's kind of this temporary host for Payman. And then Payman is transferred into the firstborn son because he demands a male host. And when you have Alex Wolff's character being bowed down to, that tableau with the headless bodies and the naked cultists and everything, that's foreshadowed as well. It's sitting on a coffee table made out of the little toys. And so it's this idea that the film is kind of cluing you into these horrible things that is going to happen before they happen. I don't think, Mark, you sort of took issue with the fact that there was no great socio-political allegory going on here. I don't think there is, but I think what it is doing is it's looking at something, this idea that you can be born into, almost by dint of your parentage, by dint of your family lineage, you can be born into catastrophe or misfortune. And the film kind of hints, it describes vaguely this idea that Tony Collette's family had mental health issues in the past. And obviously that's not what's happening here. It's an actual, real, literal demonic curse.
Yeah.
But to me, that's intensely scary, this idea that you could be helplessly on track to suffer some terrible thing in later life, purely because of where you were born, who you were born to. So that's the specific fear that this film is tapping into for me, and it terrified me witless, I have to say. Boyd Hilton will vouch for this. He was sitting beside me. I was sort of groaning and head in my hands throughout. It's that kind of scary for me. It's not the kind of scary that The Exorcist is. Yeah. And I think that's why, if you approach it expecting to be scared in that way, the film will fall short. It will fall hopelessly short.
Okay. I take all those points on board. And I think what's really interesting is that you talked about it having a lack of exposition. So for me, horror, when it's at its best, works on a couple of different levels. But the level it's always got to work on is the level of your gut. You have to buy into a story at a gut level. And you evidently did, and I know many people who did. Child 2, who is actually seen quite a lot of horror films, was really freaked out by Hereditary. And I do understand that it works for an audience. And I do think Ari Aster is a very good filmmaker. I think his short films are really terrific. And I mean, really out there. I mean, the trouble with the Johnsons is you watch it, you think, really? Okay, wow. And I think that Munchausen is really well judged. There's a story about this, kid who's going off to college and his mother doesn't want him to go, so she poisons him. So he does an awful lot of those things about families poisoning themselves and families turning in on themselves. And but my problem is very simple. In the case of Rosemary's Baby, which is based on a novel by Ira Levin, is basically a shaggy dog story, which works because it's what Ira Levin does again and again is he says, well, what if that thing was true? So, that idea that what men actually want from women is for them to be Barbie dolls. Oh, well, look, here's a film in which they literally are Barbie dolls. The whole central thing about Rosemary's Baby is she's worried that she's marrying out of the religion because if she does, that's something bad. Oh, well, it does. It turns out you marry that guy, you end up giving birth to the son of Satan. And, and it's the same with Boys from Berserk. That's a sort of recurrent idea. And so he just takes the reality and he just pushes it just a little bit further, which is actually not a million miles away from what Michael Crichton is doing in some of his thrillers, taking an idea that you kind of accept as a concept and then just going, well, what if that's actually real? And you can see an awful lot of that in Get Out, which Get Out is very much like an Ira Levin story. It's, you take that and you push it a little bit further. When I started watching Hereditary, and I didn't, I will put the Exorcist thing aside because I think that people worry too much that my response is to do with that. If you put that aside, you go at the beginning of Hereditary, there is a fantastic shot in which the camera moves in on these dolls' houses and it moves into a doll's, they're not actually dolls' houses, they're artistic, little pieces of artwork, and it moves into one that then comes to life. That it appears to be that everything that we're watching is happening inside this constructed artificial event. And I thought, that's genius. I thought the opening was just genius. It's setting it up very much in the case of the Babadook, that what you have is something which, for whatever contortions the plot may have, makes sense as a kind of, psychological, it's happening within the world of Toni Collette's consciousness, or maybe she's bringing this stuff into the world herself. And the whole of the first half an hour, I was absolutely in it. I think this is really clever. What it's doing is it's treating these characters as if they're being moved around by a force that is greater than them. Something is conspiring, blah, 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 blah. And we get up to the moment when the decapitation happens, which I gasped out loud. I was absolutely stunned.
And
by
this
the
is
decapitation.
the daughter.
The daughter.
Yeah.
This is after the party, and it's not just the decapitation. It's the
No, it's the
immediate
silence.
response.
Yeah, because you don't see the decapitation. You until later on. What you do is you see her stick her head out of the car, and then there's this noise, and then that I thought it's brilliant. That is absolutely the best opening movement of a film that I've seen in quite a long time, and I thought, wow, this is brilliant. And then it's almost as if, okay, he's got to that point, and then what he does is he suddenly decides, well, actually, it's not all that stuff that you think it is. It's plot exposition, and it's not, when you say it's not explained. It not only is it explained, it is explained at the level of somebody talking to a 4-year-old. So the opening the cabinet. Oh, here's a book. That's interesting. The book has got my mother's name in it. And here's a story of a spell to raise the thing out of the... There is a moment when a character, our central character who is grieving, meets another character who literally looks like they've walked off the set of Rosemary's Baby. She virtually has a sign on her head which says, "Do not trust me. I'm the, avuncular," or whatever the auntie equivalent of avuncular is, "and I am not to be trusted." And what she does is she takes our central character into her confidence, because it turns out she is part of a satanic cult that are part of this movement to bring back whichever the demon was called. And in order for this to happen, she has to inveigle herself into the confidence of the Toni Collette character. They go to her house, and Toni Collette looks down and says, "That's interesting doormat you've got there. I've never seen one of those doormats other than the ones that my mother made, which look exactly like that doormat, and they are very, very hard to, And the woman says, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." Now, the woman doesn't want Toni Collette to know that she knows her mother, because the whole thing is a conspiracy. Why is the doormat
Yes,
there?
right, but the doormat's there.
The doormat is there because so the filmmaker can go, "Hey, in the back row, if you've missed this, she's part of the thing that's happening." So
it's what it is.
Robbie,
And now Robbie Collin responds. Thank you.
That specific moment, the doormat, it's a joke. It's not a kind of explicitly funny joke, but it's the reaction of Anne Dowd's character where she says, Toni Collette says to her, "Oh, well, that's just like one of my grandmother's, one of my mother's doormats that she used to make." And Anne goes, "Oh, is it? That's interesting. Anyway, moving on." And that's a signal to the audience to just let out a little bit of a laugh, because we already know at that point that she is on this kind of fixed route towards total kind of satanic catastrophe.
why would she have left the doormat out?
Because it's funny. Because if you don't put these moments into, and particularly this kind of highly strung and very self-serious horror, if you don't include these moments, The Witch was another perfect example. You have to include these little kind of steam valves
The
for an
Witch
audience.
doesn't have them.
It does, but they're very, very quietly.
Okay.
They're not kind of someone falling over a banana skin or.
No, I have to respond to this since Robbie brought up The Witch. Okay, The Witch is a perfect example of what Hereditary gets wrong. The Witch is a film in which it is all absolutely based on this growing sense of internalized terror that is being externalized. Is there a supernatural force in the forest? Is there a monster in the forest? And actually, even as far as The Witch is concerned, that final sequence, does she really go into the forest and meet the witchy cult, or is it actually that what she's doing is hallucinating? Is it that we've gone into her dream? But what the witch doesn't ever do is have, there's a doormat that's interesting because it's connected to that other thing over there. Have you got a book? Because there's a book that explains that person in the plot is going there. And the witch doesn't do that thing that happens at the end of Hereditary when, okay, fine, it all comes together. The whole thing has been a witchy cult. And interestingly, when you were explaining the plot to Simon, I was just thinking, so the demon, and he comes up, and then he's got the thing, but he doesn't want to be a girl, so he's got to be, and then she's got to decapitate the thing, because then he's got to go into him, because that thing's coming up from the what's it. Okay, fine. Dennis Wheatley, okay, all good. Then they get to the end.
Stop banging your microphone.
They get to the end.
Hands on your lap.
They get up into the end bit, into the hut, right? Okay. And then they put the thing on this, and as you say, everything's been led up to. We've seen all the signs. It's all there. They put the crown on. And then somebody comes up and explains the plot. Somebody literally turns up and says, now, what happened was that the demon from hell was over here, but he needed to do that bit so that the thing, and now you, child, you are in the back row, you are, and it was like, for heaven's
But do you not?
sake.
But the whole point of having that end sequence so outrageous is that it's that kind of the jarringness of having this very kind of slow build up, the conspiracy, the uncertainty, the dread of what's happening, and then it manifests in basically the worst imaginable way possible. And to have the Andowed character spell out what has happened, to me, makes it extra exciting, because you can't just sort of ride through it on this
Basil exposition.
Okay,
It's like,
stop.
you knew
Okay,
what
here's
had
the-
happened. Why did you need somebody to literally stand there on stage and explain the plot? I felt like
Mark, can you speak into the microphone and just because you're speaking into
Okay.
the corner of the
yeah,
studio?
but I'm saying that honestly. I really felt at that moment like
I want to bring up something which you said
Yes,
in
go
your
ahead.
Kermode Uncut, because I think this is why you're shouting.
okay, I'll become.
And I know Robbie's brought this point up.
No, Robbie's being much
I'm quoting you.
more well, and arguing
Here's
very well.
Here's a tip. If you have a horror movie and it's really great, please don't tell me it's the new Exorcist, because I'm already annoyed. That's what you said, because I'm already annoyed. And in a previous thing you said, you've put my back up. So that, I reckon, I wonder if this is working as like the secondary infection, is that you actually are annoyed, is that you'll disagree. That's
I'm
fine,
not-
you'll disagree, but you're actually, that's why you're shouting into the corner, is because you're
But I'm not
actually
annoyed because it's being. I mean, I think the Exorcist comparison is foolish. Incidentally,
See, there you go.
it's
That's what
incidentally it's mentioned in more than one review. There are 3 reviews which bring. I mean, there was the first review that did it, but there are 3 separate reviews that do the Exorcist comparison.
And on
Because
what grounds, though? Because thematically, it is
Yeah.
in line roughly with The Exorcist.
It's not.
It's just the mechanics.
No,
aren't.
it's not. This.
Oh, no,
okay.
let's please not have an argument about The Exorcist.
No, let's have an argument about The Exorcist.
No, let's not.
No, I'll be quick about it. The problem is that The Exorcist is such a different beast from every single, but first, not least because The Exorcist isn't funny. I mean, it's not funny at all, which is weird because Blatty was a comedy writer. But The Exorcist is absolutely not funny. When Stephen King wrote about the novel of The Exorcist in Danse Macabre, he described it as a humorless thudding tract. And he said the problem with it is it is a work of somebody who is just militantly saying, this is the course, okay? And when you make the film of it, and it's made by Friedkin, who actually feels very differently to the way that Blatty does, you get a tension, you get a spark between those things. Is it, I mean, I know that the reason they cut out the first medical examination is because, John Calley said, everyone knows she's possessed. It's called The Exorcist. You don't need another medical examination. But there is still, in a remarkable amount of The Exorcist, even when it becomes absurd sort of special effects, there is still kind of underlying consistency of this is to do with something other than demonic possession. I mean, it is absolutely true that the way that The Exorcist has aged worst nowadays is that when Karras walks in and sees Reagan on the bed, you go, okay, she's clearly possessed. That's not a mental illness. That is, she's turned into a monster. And actually, that's the thing I think which loses a modern audience. But it still makes psychological sense. The Babadook makes absolute psychological sense. It works on a completely coherent psychological level. What happens with as does The Exorcist, what happens with Hereditary is it starts out with a really brilliant psychological conceit, which it then throws out of the window with a bunch of mechanical stuff that's not necessary. If you took all of that stuff, all of that exposition out of Hereditary, it would be a much better film.
Okay, here's Robbie Collin now.
Yeah, but you've mentioned also that this is the R11 resonance, which you picked up on. The R11 films, Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby, and also Get Out, which is massively Lebanese,
yeah.
those do have those little moments of humour built into them. Now,
Yes, they do.
Get Out is not a laugh-out-loud comedy. I would never describe it as a comedy. In fact, Jordan Peele was annoyed that it was nominated in the comedy
Yeah, he said it should have been nominated as a documentary.
at the Golden Globes, exactly.
Yeah.
But you can't deny that that structure, the idea of the mounting paranoia, the mounting dread, the characters who don't know what's going on in front of an audience who do, that's when the audience needs those moments of humour and these little bizarre kind of weird clashy bits, like the doormat scene, where it's just kind of winking at the audience and saying, okay, so look, this is a moment that you can kind of breathe out, you can have a little bit of smile, you can relax because we're going to move on to something terrifying. And it does move on to something terrifying. Now, if you keep the sort of mood intensely doomy all the way through, then you can do that with a film like The Exorcist because that's the kind of terror it's going for. That's the story it's telling. But with this story, you can't do that. You have to have these ups and downs, and this is why at the end, when things just go berserk, to me, that's the kind of the filmmaker sort of laying all the cards on the table and saying, look, this is the story we're telling. If you've come with me this far, now we're going to have some fun with it. Now we're going to have, Toni Collette scuttling around on the ceiling and kind of doing this weird swimmy thing through thin air. And the construction of those scenes, the bit at which the son, Peter, is in the front room.
Yeah.
And we've already seen Toni Collette sticking up in the corner like this kind of spider.
Yeah. Although that's an Exorcist 3 reference, that's clearly an
right. No, sure, but I'm talking just purely on the basis of technique.
Yeah.
You get the POV shot of the son
Yeah.
looking up into the corner to see if she's there or not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the fact that Astor staged that with the POV and he swings up from ground level to that corner, that gives you as the viewer enough time to kind of think to yourself, do I want to see her there or do I not want to see her there? Because both possibilities are bad and are scary.
Yeah.
But in giving you that time and building in that little moment for audience reaction, he's playing with you in a way that a film like The Exorcist doesn't.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. I think that is a very well made point, and I absolutely think, and I'll say it again because people don't hear it, I think he is a really, really talented filmmaker. And I think that there are enough of exactly those things that he does to make the annoyance with the plot the problem. I don't think there are a couple of moments in the film that I think are actually technically badly handled. I think Gabriel Byrne catching on fire is just stupid. I think it's done badly. It reminded me of Toby Hooper's Spontaneous Combustion or whatever that film was called when everyone caught fire, and I thought it was just badly done. He's standing there and then I just thought it was that was weird. And it was weird because up until that point, everything else, I think, on a technical level, had been brilliantly executed. But what frustrates me, and again, I know that people don't believe this, the thing that frustrates me the most and really rattles my cage about Hereditary is the things it gets right. Because when you've got the ability to do that opening sequence, when you've got the ability to do exactly that moment, I mean, it is an Exorcist 3 moment, but it's done well, and it's done exactly as you say. I mean, that's, then why bolt it to such a hokey, creaky, plot-ridden, device-ridden, exposition-ridden narrative that just appears to treat the audience like they're idiots, like the end of Psycho, and having to explain the whole thing with it suddenly felt like you. It's that lack of trust with the filmmaker when I know.
But there's a question at the end of Psycho, though, whether that does explain what's happened or not.
Yeah, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't explain anything.
And whether or not Hitchcock meant it to explain it or not. And it's just a kind of a palliative to people who are in the audience. They're sort of grasping for something to make sense of what's happened.
Yeah.
Then on the way home, you think, hold on.
Yeah, okay. So it's not even as good as the exposition at the end of Psycho.
No, sure, but is that exposition at the end of Psycho supposed to be good?
Yes.
Or is it supposed to sound glib in retrospect when we think about
Mark,
it?
when you said the comparisons on the poster, which have been made by critics who, in my opinion, should know better, do not help the movie.
Yeah.
Is Robbie one of those critics?
No, because Robbie hasn't. I don't think you made the comparison.
The two comparisons that I made were Rosemary's Baby in terms of the mechanics of the relation of what the characters on screen know to what the audience in the cinema knows.
Yeah.
And the other one was Kill List, this kind of moment where, and that was a comparison that you did take issue with, was this idea that we get to a point where the pin comes out and it goes into the balloon and then just all hell breaks loose from then on. But if you look at the way in which Hereditary is broken up, I think the exposition that you're talking about only comes in about 3/4 of the way through.
It comes in at almost exactly the 45-minute part with the discovery of the book, which is about half the way through.
No, the discovery of the book is very, very close to the end because there's about, I think, an hour and a half in, she unpacks the box properly. There's a previous box unpacking scene where she just finds some photos that are kind of
how far in is the how far in is the doormat?
No, we're not hanging on
the doormat. Now the doormat's just before the first kind of unambiguous supernatural occurrence.
Well, wherever the doormat is.
Sorry.
So that's an hour.
I saw the trailer and I decided I wasn't going to see it. But I'm glad that we've sorted that out. And next week, Robbie and Mark are going to sort out Brexit.
Can I say one last thing?
Oh, really?
Yes, really.
You haven't had long enough?
No, I'll be really brief.
But then Robbie has to say, you have one sentence.
I thought we could do Heaven's Gate next, actually.
One sentence.
I will do Heaven's
and
Gate.
then Robbie's going to have to have it. And then that's it.
I think that Robbie has argued his case really well, and I think that you have made a couple of points that are not just pertinent, but I think, actually make me think, okay, I probably need to see Hereditary again. That said, my problem with the plot and the structure of it, I think, is so great that it won't overcome those problems. But what you have done is voiced why it is, I think, that the film works for some people. And I know it does because I've spoken to enough people who really, really like it. So I absolutely appreciate and take that on board.
Robbie.
I mean, it's that litmus test like with comedy. You know, horror either scares you or it doesn't. Comedy either makes you laugh or it doesn't. And Hereditary, for, days and days after watching it, I was checking the corner of the bedroom at night, terrified that I would see Toni Collette up there.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Robbie.